Okay, we have people coming in here. Thank you for being with us today. I know it's morning for me, afternoon for some people on the panel. Appreciate you being here with us. I'm Rochelle Scouten, Development Director at the National Bicycle Dealers Association, and we are so happy to have representatives from different sections of UL in here with us. We have a good partnership with UL. We've done a lot with them over the past year, year and a half, 2 years. And we are really grateful for that partnership and all of the education that they have helped us give to our members. So I'm going to go ahead and let David McKnight take over. Thank you all for being here and for giving this information to our members.
Great, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for the opportunity. You want to jump to the first slide, Rochelle? And we'll go to one more. There we go. Great. Well, thanks so much. As Rochelle mentioned, my name is Dave McKnight, and I'm the head of partnerships for UL Standards and Engagement. And in my role, I really focus on partnerships to build awareness and understanding of ULSE to key stakeholders and drive specific partnerships to shape actions and advance advocacy. A little bit about UL. We've been around for more than a century. We were born out of the Chicago World's Fair in 1893 and have really been at the forefront of innovation ever since. In 2022, the organization looked around a changing world and really started to rethink how can we best address the world's safety science challenges. And out of that came three distinct organizations with one shared mission, and that's really working for a safer world. So we have three organizations, UL Research Institutes, and that's really focused on forward-thinking research that investigates developing threats to safety science. Think digital safety, fire safety, battery safety, UL Standards and Engagement. That is who we are. And we put safety science into action by developing standards and advocating to make emerging technologies, products, and systems safer. And then, of course, we have UL Solutions, and they use our standards to test, inspect, and certify products and systems, and also provide business advisory services. Next slide. So a little bit more about UL Standards and Engagement. We're a global nonprofit standards development organization. We've been developing standards for over 120 years and have over 1,700 standards ranging from fire doors to autonomous vehicles. The and engagement function is new, and we do that by building partnerships to help ensure our knowledge reaches industry leaders, safety professionals, policymakers, and others who can really use our safety science to protect and educate our communities. Our partnership with NBDA is a perfect example of this function. We understand that e-bikes are an important part of the continued growth for the bicycle industry, and we've really been at the forefront of developing e-mobility safety standards that protect both the retailer and the consumer. Next slide, please. So what are the objectives of UL Standards and Engagement? We enable innovation. We mitigate risk through the development of safety standards, and that allows innovation to thrive and not be stifled by fear. We grow trust. We are a nonprofit. We're not impacted by specific business interests. Our standards are consensus-based, and my colleague Diana will go into that in a minute, but we solely exist to protect human health and safety. And we promote access. Voluntary standards preserve markets and help protect product availability. So with that, I'm excited to turn it over to my colleague, Diana Pappas Jordan, who will give an overview of the standards development process. Diana?
Thank you, David. So hello, everybody. This is Diana Pappas Jordan. I hope everybody, thumbs up, everybody can hear me. Good? Okay, good, thank you. So I'm here today just to give you an overview, a quick overview of, oh, next slide, I'm sorry, Rochelle. You could do, yeah, right there, that's good. So I'm here today to give you an overview of our standards development process for the UL standards development. Just so you know, personally, I have responsibility for all of the battery standards at UL. I have a lot of the wind, the solar, so alternative energy, and I also have the e-bike standard. So I'll be focusing a little bit more on the e-bike standard today, which is UL 2849. Next slide. So just following up on what David was getting into, why do we do what we do? Why do we develop standards? So at the end of the day, our standards provide requirements to ensure the safety and sustainability of a wide range of products. Safety requirements, typically product standards might be more what you're familiar with, Those will typically have the construction requirements, performance requirements, which are the testing requirements, the required safety markings, instructions, there'll be glossary terms, all of those types of things are in the standard, in a UL standard. We also have sustainability standards. Those contain requirements for the life cycle of the product. The last bullet there is important to note that we actually are accredited to be a standards developer in both the US, Canada, and Mexico, although our accreditation in Mexico is very limited. So there are a lot of cases where when we publish a standard, it is both the national standard for the United States and for Canada, which actually is the case for the e-bike standard 2849. In addition, sometimes our requirements end up in the IEC or ISO standards. On the converse, sometimes we actually adopt IEC and ISO standards also. So really, in a nutshell, the reason we develop standards is really to make the world a safer place. Okay, next slide. So right here, the technical committee, some of you, this is a new terminology for us. Some of you might be familiar with the term STP or Standards Technical Panel. It's identical, we just changed the name. So if you think of STP, it's interchangeable with TC. TC is the new terminology. So the technical committee, this is our consensus body that votes on the standards. So these are, our group of volunteers that really help us with the standards. This is the heart of our process. If we didn't have our technical committee members, it would be very difficult for us to keep these standards, revised. So on the top, you'll see there's a chair and a project manager. Those two people are UL employees, UL Standards employees. With respect to the e-bike standard, I am the chair. Madison Lee, you might have heard her name. She is the project manager for the e-bike standard. Across the bottom, you'll see those are the different interest categories that comprise a technical committee. Our goal is to have no one of those groups more than 1/3. And the real reason is we don't want one group to dominate from a voting perspective. Now, with respect to 2849, I have some numbers here. We have 29 voting members, so that's great. We're very good balanced. We have no category over 1/3. We have producers at 31%, supply chains about 10. Commercial industrial, we don't have any, and something to note too, not every category has to be represented. General is 28%, government is 7%, testing and standards is 21%, and consumer is 3%. So we actually have a very good balanced technical committee. Next slide. So right here, this is just a slide that shows some of the members that are on our technical committee, just so people know. So it is a diverse group of industry members. Next slide. So this slide now, our process. So this is our process in one slide. I have to admit our process is much more complicated than just one slide here, but we'll give you the high level overview. Happy to go into any details separate if we need to. So the first step in our process is that there's a standard and you're using the standard and maybe there's new technology or something isn't clear, or you feel that the standard should be revised to address new safety issues. You go into our system, CSDS, which is our customized electronic system. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But you submit a proposal and you have to include a rationale. Why do you want to make the change? Then you have to submit a proposal. The proposal is the content and strikeout or underline. Then you submit it. It comes to standards. So it will come to me and to Madison. We would look at it to make sure it's complete. If it's complete, we'll put it in the template and we get it ready for preliminary review to send out to our technical committee and any stakeholders. The whole purpose of preliminary review is, first, it's an optional step, but it's just to get preliminary input from our committee. Is there support for this, not support for this? What are people thinking? Comments are received during preliminary review, we do not reply to. So after preliminary review, we send all of the comments to whoever submitted the proposal, and we're like, here are the comments. How do you want to proceed? Do you want to proceed to ballot? Sometimes it's like, no, I don't want to proceed. There are a lot of negative comments. I really need to do a lot of rework. So let's not go to ballot because I know it's going to fail. Maybe there were no comments or very little comments. They might say, I want to go to ballot, but I want to make some changes, or I don't want to make changes. Then we prepare it for ballot. Then after ballot, we look at if we have consensus or not. We might have consensus. If we don't, the proposal might be a failed proposal. If we have consensus and there's comments, typically they will go into recirculation would be the next step. And recirculation gives everybody the opportunity to see all of the comments received, how all of the comments were resolved, and information if any of the proposal was changed. So maybe the proposal was 5 paragraphs. If maybe just one of those paragraphs are changed, that would be the only paragraph in the recirculation. So everyone could comment on that. And then everybody would have also the opportunity to change their vote during recirculation if they want. So all of those steps are done in CSDS. At the end of recirculation, if we have consensus, we go towards publication. If we don't, then the process has failed. Now, in addition, the one thing that's not up on here are meetings. We hold meetings at any time in the process that as needed. So there could be a meeting pretty much anywhere. Since our business is all done online, all voting is done online, meetings, it's really to talk about standards proposals, but no voting is done at meetings. So that's why we're not on. There are some committees that don't meet, some committees that meet more frequently. With respect to this standard, there have been a lot of discussions with the industry. We've had a few meetings over the years. We had a meeting in 2018, 2019, and 2021. The first edition of 2849 was published in 2020, although we had outlines previously before that. And then we've revised the standard since then in 2022, and we're continuing to work on standards. So again, with the help of the industry members, we really appreciate your support on all of this. And if you think of a standard as a living document, it's not a static document. As there's new technology, new safety issues that maybe come about, we work with the industry to continue to keep our standard up to date to keep people safe. Next slide. So participation, we talked about this a little bit. Participation is free and open to all interested parties, either as a committee member or a stakeholder. So unlike other organizations, there's no fee. If you want to become a part of our committees, you have to apply. We can provide you with information as to how to apply. You can apply for a TC member. Some cases we're not able to accept everybody due to balance. Sometimes we also don't allow multiple people from the same company, but if we cannot add you, you can be a stakeholder. So again, you can participate. A stakeholder can do everything a committee member can do. They can submit proposals, comment, attend meetings. Really, the only difference is that a non-committee member just cannot vote. That's really the biggest difference. CSDS, I talked about that a little bit. That's our electronic online system. It's available 24/7, so you can look at proposals anytime. It's not limited to anybody. You just have to have an account to dial into it. There's a link there. We'll provide the slides afterwards. You'll have a link to CSDS. Why else would you participate? Well, you can help influence the requirements, and you could be aware of what's coming. What are the new requirements? So it's very important to find out about the changes in the beginning, and you can influence those requirements. You also can network with other industry members, share different experiences, share, I have this problem or that problem. How can we solve it? How can we revise the standard? And again, at the end of the day, really, it's all about making the world safer. So that really is how you're contributing to make these products safer for everybody. Next slide. The one, here's a screenshot in CSDS. I just wanted to have in the PowerPoint when you guys have it later, and there's a link there too. What we want you to do, that if you want to follow a standard, it's just sort of like subscribing to something. You have to go into CSDS and you can follow any standard that you want. You might be a member, you might not be a member. If you're a member, you will get notified when there's a meeting or a proposal out there for comment. If you're not a TC member, you would not get that. If you're a TC member, you only would get it for what you're a member of. So if you're on 2849, but you might be interested in, I wonder what's happening in plastics, or I wonder what's happening with batteries. I would recommend, if you're not on those committees, you could also apply for those committees if you'd like. But I would recommend following a standard, and then anytime there's a meeting, there's a proposal, you will get notified. You can go into CSDS and comment if you'd like. And you could always, unfollow the standard at any point if you like. But I think this is a newer feature that we have in CSDS now. So I think that's important to point out. Next slide. So this next slide, access to standards. A lot of people always say, how do I get standards? They're hundreds of dollars. How do we get standards? This is also a feature that we offer. We feel it's important, for our mission, that everybody could have access to our standards. So we have a free preview. The link, we have the link there too, so you could look at any of our UL standards for free. One thing to note, that you cannot download, you cannot print, you can't cut and paste, and that is really by design. If you really want the whole standard, we would want you to purchase the standard. However, there might be some cases, I wonder in this other standard how they're doing a certain test. So you could load any of our standards for free. You do have to have an account to do that too, but it is free access. The other thing at the bottom, just something to note, is that due to copyright issues, if the standard is based upon an IEC or an ISO standard, what you would be able to view would be the UL national, the US national differences. You would not be able to view the IEC or ISO content, and that is really because of copyright. They own that copyright, so we could not provide that in the free digital view. Okay, next slide. So I hope everyone has now a little bit better understanding of our process. I went through that fast and happy to answer any specific questions just about the process. I could spend a whole half a day on the process if anyone wanted to, but hopefully that's a good overview. Feel free to reach out to me with any questions. And we look forward to always your continued support and interest in our committees, for 2849 and maybe any other committee if you want to join another committee. So, the more people we can have in our committees, the better the standard will be. So I thank you very much. I look forward to any further questions at the end of the presentations. So thank you. And then I would like to pass it off now to Ibrahim Jilani. He will go over some of the UL Solutions content.
Thank you very much, Diana. A little bit of hoarseness in my voice. I'm overcoming a cold, but hopefully it will not deter the presentation. I had done a couple of webinars, one with the National Bicycle Dealers Association and another one prior with People for Bikes. So some of this content you may have come across before, but I'll try to summarize it and keep it a high level about the technical requirements of UL 2849, how the standard is put together in a way that is then acted upon by a certification company, and also how a manufacturer demonstrates their compliance to the standard. Next slide, please. So at the heart of the standard, what it's trying to address at the very heart of it is the issue of thermal runaway. As many know, the lithium-ion batteries have a propensity for thermal runaway, which is when the lithium cell, has its thermal energy go into an uncontrolled state, which then ultimately results in an explosion or fire. It's usually because there's a heat generation happening inside of the cell due to a breakdown of the internal materials, and that heat generation then becomes uncontrolled and then becomes an event that propagates to the other cells and ultimately becomes a fire and explosion, which is why there has been so much sensitivity to the topic of e-bikes as well as other types of micromobility. This chart was put together by our colleagues in the UL Research Institute, one of the three brands and companies that David had mentioned. And what they're sharing here is, depending on the chemistry that's selected for a specific lithium-ion battery, they have different points of which when thermal runaway may protective layers break down, and that the flammable electro Hi, Rochelle, are you still there? I lost the slides.
Still here. I think we're good. Everyone's here. I will just reshare.
Okay. Go ahead to the next slide. Thank you. So UL 2849 has a system approach to how it addresses the thermal runaway issue. It takes into account every part of the system, the battery cell, as well as when the battery cells become a battery pack, and as well as the electric motor that plays a role in the safety of the product, as well as the battery charger. It also looks at control circuits, both at the e-bike motor control level, as well as the battery management system. So the idea here is that all elements of the system, as it's being put together to make an e-bike, are looked at for its potential explosion, fire, as well as electric shock risk that come from things like the battery charger, and that there's compatibility and that there's a handshake between the charger and the host device, that being the e-bike, as well as the e-bike's use of the battery pack, the battery cell, and the electric motor are kept within its operating parameters that were originally defined for those components, and that the overall system then stays within its operating parameters, ultimately making it a safe product. So to certify the UL 2849, all of this is being encompassed in the standard, and it becomes something that the e-bike manufacturer addresses and does it in different stages. The components are done in one stage, and then the control circuit evaluations are done in another stage, and then ultimately the final certification of the host device, the e-bike itself, is undertaken as well. Next slide. Within 2849, it's really important to know that not only is there a system approach, but majority of the requirements in 2849 are actually not testing. So a lot of the requirements have to do with construction and design and engineering principles. It also looks at requirements for the specific materials and components, and making sure that materials and components that are used in the system have the right ratings and right certifications in order for it to be relied upon from a safety perspective. And make sure that the critical safety circuits are having requirements applied to them. It also has test requirements, of course. And then safety and user instructions. It's very important that the user instructions and the safety instructions on the product are easily understood by the user or by the consumer that then receives the product. Next slide, please. And specific to those components that make up the e-bike system, for a battery charger, there's a call out that the battery charger needs to meet UL 62368-1. It's a well-known audio video information communication technology standard. It's also used for power supplies and battery chargers, so it's a well-known standard for that. And that is a standard that gets called out. And really what happens here is the call out is done, and then the battery charger manufacturer or that particular component needs to be evaluated under 62368 to then show that it's demonstrated compliance and can be used in the UL 2849 e-bike system. Same thing for the battery pack. UL 2271 is a call out standard, and it's the most pronounced called out standard. There are a couple other options that are in the UL 2849 that are published as potential ways you can evaluate the battery pack. But UL 2271 is certainly the most appropriate, and also the one being called out in the recently passed New York City law that they're expecting that the battery packs meet UL 2271. Electric motors are certified under UL 1004-1. That's a standard that's about the construction of the windings and the way the electric motor is put together to basically make sure that the electric motor does not contribute or act as a source of the fire, explosion, or electric shock risk. And depending on how high the voltage is on the electric motor, there can be additional requirements that then get added to make sure that the system is safe. And then really important here is control circuits. These control circuits are, again, on the battery management system as well as on the e-bike motor control. There are a series of standards that are allowed, and the most common ones that are applied are UL 1998 and UL 991. Another one that's also applied is ISO 13849-1-2. Those types of control circuit standards are there to ensure that the hardware and the software of the control circuits is reliable, and that the safety functions of the software are kept partitioned away from other functions of the software. So for example, the software that says that you are not to go above a certain speed, and this is the maximum assist that can happen, those are critically safe software that needs to be uneditable, meaning that the user can't override those parameters, while some other software may be about other aspects and features of the e-bike, which may be allowed to be modified by the user. The critical safety side has to be partitioned from the feature side, and that's what's checked in those types of evaluations. There is a lot of requirements as well about adhesive cables, connectors, cords, enclosures, and other parts of the system. A very classic one that comes up often is gaskets. Gaskets have requirements, and a lot of times gaskets are being used to help reach IP ratings of the battery pack or of the system. So gaskets need to meet its material requirements, and that's really a critical one that comes up often, that we'll have a discussion with the manufacturer to ensure that the gaskets have met the UL 2849 published requirements. Next slide, please. From a test perspective, there's really four major categories. There's the electrical test, mechanical test, environmental, motor and materials test. And here, when we say electrical, we're really focused on anything that could cause thermal runaway. So a lot of these tests are done with a component fault methodology. What that means is that when you run the test, you do assume that a single component can fail during the life of that electronic circuit. And so as a result of that component failure, will that result in a system failure? And so there, oftentimes a short circuit is done over a specific unrelied circuit component, and then verify that the battery pack or the overall system still can fail safely with no explosion, fire, or electric shock hazards. From a mechanical standpoint, this is limited to things that would affect the electrical system. This is not about the mechanical testing that's required for bicycles that are called out in 16 CFR 1512. This does not override or change any of those requirements. 16 CFR 1512 is still the bicycle safety requirements for frames and for brakes and other such aspects of the bicycle system, but specifically for the electrical system and ensuring that it does not result in any type of explosion, fire, or electric shock hazard. These mechanical tests are done that could have affected the electrical system. Environmental tests are also done to verify that factors like humidity and water ingress and thermal cycling of different temperatures from very cold to very hot does not have an effect on the electrical system. Motor and material testing, these are all about making sure that the electric motor, if it got overloaded or locked, it does not result in a fire. And if that fire were to happen, then it could result in a fire of the entire system. If it reaches the battery pack, then of course it becomes catastrophic, where the thermal runaway events start to occur. It also does some testing to make sure that the startup assistance and motor assistance does not go beyond the stated levels. And for startup assistance, when you're walking next to your bike and you're using the startup assistance mode, that it should not go beyond a walking speed, so that it doesn't kick out from underneath you, the bicycle. There has been a couple of incidences in the news in the past where the bicycle kind of kicked out from underneath the user, even though they were just doing kind of a walk assist mode. They weren't trying to they weren't pedaling, they were just walking next to their bicycle and using the button to help them get up the hill. So there should be a maximum speed of a walking speed that's checked for. And then there's other tests that are making sure that the cutoff and that pedaling types tests are ensuring the safety of the electrical system. Next slide, please. One important thing that I want to cover on this slide is that oftentimes we've seen in recent months, especially after the New York City law passed, that many discussions are around what does it mean to be UL 2849 compliant. And I will say this, that if anyone's declaring compliance to UL 2849, that would mean that it met all the requirements that I just briefly went over, which include a lot of non-test requirements. And if the claim is that, oh, I tested to UL 2849, testing to 2849 is not compliance. Testing is just a portion of what needs to be done. It's, actually in the standard, 1/3 or less of the published requirements are actually related to testing. The other 2/3 are related to the other topics I mentioned, like construction materials, engineering principles. In order to demonstrate compliance, the most common way is to make sure that an OSHA National Recognized Test Laboratory has issued a certification. And OSHA National Recognized Test Laboratories are accredited by OSHA. That we have to maintain quality records. We have to apply and have them review and check us for our competency and ability to offer the certification. They check both the engineering competency, not just the testing capabilities. They want to make sure that the compliance engineers that are involved are actually competent and knowledgeable on the subject that they're certifying against. And this applies to 2849, as well as the personal e-mobility device standard 2272, as well as the light electric vehicle battery pack standard UL 2271. So the recommendation is that always look for at least an ISO 17065 certification organization, or better yet, look for an OSHA National Recognized Test Laboratory to have been the certifier of the product, and that is then a demonstration of compliance. And the other main reason why, especially for bicycle dealers, why you would want something to be certified rather than just tested to, is that it has ongoing factory surveillance. OSHA requires, and most certification programs require, that if you're certifying a product, that there be inspections done at the factory on a regular basis. In UL's case, we quarterly inspect the factory and make sure that the e-bike that's coming off the production runs are the same as what was brought in when it was originally sent into UL for certification. So if a manufacturer has gotten certification from us and is UL 2849 certified, as the year goes on and they continue to produce that same make and model of the e-bike's electrical system, we will be checking that factory to ensure that that factory continues to make the e-bike and sets it up with the same components, same design that was approved and hasn't modified it, and then ultimately able to continue to utilize the UL mark and certification mark as part of the ongoing factory surveillance efforts. All right, next slide, please. And David, I'll turn it back over to you for moderating the Q&A.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Ibrahim. Thank you so much, Diana, Pappas, Jordan. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. We're happy to answer them now. We also have a slide that has contact information. We're happy to send you an email, or you can send an email. We can get back to you.
I know that a frequent question that we get is, how does a retailer or a consumer check which brands have been certified to UL standards?
Great question, and that's actually a very easy way to get there, and it's called the UL Product IQ database. So in the chat, I'm going to type it, but I'm going to mention it for the purposes of the webinar, ul.com/database. So if ever you go to ul.com/database, that is the UL Product IQ certification directory. One can access it without logging in, but if you do log in, there's a lot more rich information and details. ul.com/database, you can then search specifically for UL 2849 certified e-bikes. We put that under a category code system, and the specific category code for UL 2849 is the 4 letters Q as in Quincy, G as in George, N as in Nancy, S as in Sam, so QGNS. And you'd be able to find all the UL certified e-bike systems. Now, one of the things I should mention about this is whoever was the applicant that submitted to UL to get certified, their name would appear, or whoever they've authorized name would show up. So if company is got a foreign name, like a company from China's name, they may be selling to a brand in the United States, and that brand in the United States then puts on the China manufacturer's system. I think this a little bit closer, and so more conversations from your side as dealers would be helpful to say to them, hey, you know what, make sure your brand names show up on the UL directory, and the company who was the original applicant, they can apply for that. So we're happy to do what's called an alternate listee or a multiple listee. Those are common processes, and that allows for other company names to show up in the directory.
That is definitely helpful. Thank you so much. I don't believe I see any more questions coming in today, but as David said, we are always welcome to answer questions afterward. His email is on the screen right now. If you want to email us, it's info@nbda.com, and we'll make sure to get your question to the person who can answer it, and then make sure to get that answer to you. So I just want to thank all of you again for being here and for all the information. I know we get questions on this kind of thing, on how can I get involved? How can I be more informed every single day? And so it's really, really wonderful for you guys to come here and spend your time and answer those questions for us. So again, thank you for being here.
Great. Well, thank you so much for the opportunity. And just to kind of close it out, I think a few key points. you saw that there's a very comprehensive process in developing a safety standard. So when you see that standard, there was a lot of thought and debate that went into that. And that really helps innovation thrive. And your voice does matter. We'd love to get you engaged on our technical committees as a stakeholder. We want your seat at the table. That really helps us develop new standards, but also revise existing standards. And that the role of safety standards in our safety science really is to protect you, but also your consumers. And that's really what our goal is.
Absolutely. Thank you so much again. Again, if anybody has any questions, get in contact with us. We are so happy to help out. And with that, we are going to say goodbye. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.